The screens flickered to life behind Gregory Matthews as he stood at the podium, his perfectly rehearsed smile frozen on his face. 300 of the most powerful people in the city had gathered to celebrate his 50th birthday. Every business titan, every politician, every journalist who mattered was in that ballroom. Naomi watched from her table as the first message appeared on the massive displays. She had timed it perfectly. Gregory was mid-sentence, talking about integrity and family values, when the words lit up the screens in 48-point font. "Can't wait to have you inside me again. The hotel room is already booked." The gasp started immediately. Gregory's head whipped around. His face drained of color as he saw his own text messages projected for everyone to see. Messages to Candace, his assistant, his lover. For 15 years. But Naomi wasn't done. Not even close. She took a slow sip of her champagne and waited for the next slide. This is how a marriage ends. Not with tears. Not with screaming. But with truth displayed on screens so bright, lies have nowhere left to hide. But to understand how Naomi Matthews became the woman who destroyed her husband's empire in front of 300 witnesses, you have to go back to where it started. To a Tuesday morning 3 months earlier. Naomi was making breakfast when Gregory's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He was in the shower, water running, steam seeping under the bathroom door. The phone lit up with a notification. She glanced at it the way any wife might. Casual. Innocent. The message preview showed a woman's name. Candace. "Last night was incredible. I'm still thinking about your hands on me." Naomi's knife stopped mid-cut through the bagel. She stared at the screen until it went dark. Then she picked up the phone. Her hands weren't shaking yet. That would come later. The phone unlocked with Gregory's passcode. Their anniversary. How perfectly ironic. She opened the messages. And she started scrolling. One message became 10. 10 became 50. 50 became hundreds. Naomi sat down at the kitchen table, the bagel forgotten, and she read every single word. The affair wasn't new. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was 15 years old. 15 years of "I love you" texts sent to another woman. 15 years of hotel reservations and fake business trips. 15 years of intimate details about a life Naomi thought was private. Her struggles with fertility. Her father's death. Her insecurities. Gregory had told Candace everything. And Candace had responded with sympathy, with understanding, with the kind of emotional intimacy that Naomi thought she shared with her husband. She found photos. Not just any photos. Pictures of them together at conferences Naomi had attended. Candace in the background, always professional, always appropriate. But the camera rolls showed what happened after Naomi went to bed. Candace in Gregory's hotel room. Candace wearing Naomi's anniversary gift to Gregory, a watch that cost $40,000. Candace laughing at inside jokes that Naomi wasn't part of. The shower turned off. Gregory would be out in minutes. Naomi closed the messages, placed the phone exactly where it had been, and went back to cutting the bagel. Her hands were steady now. Gregory walked into the kitchen in his tailored suit, still adjusting his cufflinks. He kissed her cheek the way he did every morning. Quick. Routine. Meaningless. "Coffee ready?" "Just finished brewing." He poured himself a cup, grabbed his phone, and checked his messages. Right in front of her. Casual. Comfortable. Completely confident that she had no idea. "Big day today," he said, scrolling through his emails. "Meeting with the investors at 10, lunch with the board at noon, and then I have to fly to Boston for that conference. I'll be back Thursday." "Boston," Naomi repeated. "The tech conference." "Right. Boring panels and networking events, but it's important for the company." "Will Candace be going with you?" Gregory didn't even blink. "Of course. I need someone to manage my schedule while I'm there." Of course, Naomi echoed. He kissed her again, grabbed his briefcase, and walked out the door. Naomi stood in the kitchen for a long time after he left. The coffee grew cold in her cup. The bagel remained half-cut on the cutting board. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She was thinking. Because Naomi Matthews wasn't just a housewife. She wasn't just the woman who hosted Gregory's dinner parties and smiled for the cameras at charity events. 25 years ago, Naomi Chen had been one of the most brilliant fraud analysts in corporate America. She had built her reputation taking apart financial schemes that billion-dollar companies thought were bulletproof. She could look at a spreadsheet and see the lies hidden in the numbers. She could trace money through shell corporations and offshore accounts. She could find truth where everyone else saw only carefully constructed fiction. And then she met Gregory Matthews. He had come to her firm desperate. His family's company was drowning in debt, tangled in bad investments and questionable partnerships. He needed someone who could untangle the mess and save the business. Naomi had spent 6 months buried in his family's financial history. She found the fraud. She found the money. She restructured the entire operation. She saved his empire. And somewhere in those late nights working together, somewhere between spreadsheets and strategy sessions, she fell in love with him. Or at least, she fell in love with who she thought he was. They got married a year later. Gregory asked her to step back from her career. The company needed her, he said. Not as an analyst, but as a partner. Someone he could trust. Someone who could help him build something bigger. I need you with me, he had said, holding her hands across the dinner table where he proposed. Not as an employee. As my equal. So she left her firm. She stepped away from the career she had spent a decade building. She became Mrs. Gregory Matthews. And she watched as Gregory took everything she had taught him, every strategy she had crafted, every connection she had made, and he built an empire. His empire. His name on the buildings. His face on the magazine covers. Naomi became the woman who planned the charity galas. The woman who smiled beside him in photographs. The woman everyone called gracious and elegant and supportive. But nobody called her brilliant anymore. Nobody remembered that she was the reason Gregory Matthews had anything to build on in the first place. Except Naomi remembered. And now, standing in her kitchen with the taste of betrayal sharp in her mouth, she remembered something else. She remembered exactly how to take apart an empire built on lies. Naomi walked to her home office and closed the door. She sat down at her desk and opened her laptop. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory that hadn't faded despite the years away. She started with the easy things. Bank statements. Credit card records. Travel expenses. The Boston trip wasn't for a conference. There was no tech conference in Boston that week. But there was a reservation at the Four Seasons under Gregory's name. A suite with a king bed and a view of the harbor. For 2 people. Naomi made a spreadsheet. She had always been good with spreadsheets. Column 1, date. Column 2, location. Column 3, stated reason for travel. Column 4, actual reason for travel. She worked backward through their calendar. Every business trip. Every late night at the office. Every weekend conference. 15 years of data. 15 years of lies. The patterns emerged quickly. Gregory had been meticulous about covering his tracks financially. The hotel rooms were always booked through the company. The flights were always justified with business meetings. But Naomi knew how to look deeper. She found the gifts. Jewelry purchases that never made it home to her. Clothing bought in sizes she didn't wear. Restaurant reservations at places Gregory claimed he'd never been. She found the money. Transactions to an account she didn't recognize. Small amounts at first, a few thousand here and there. But over 15 years, it added up to nearly $2 million. Gregory had been funding a separate life. And then Naomi found something that made her stop breathing. A property deed. For a condo downtown. Purchased 8 years ago. Not in Gregory's name. In Candace's name. But the down payment had come from one of Gregory's shell corporations. He had bought his mistress an apartment. With company money. With money that was partially Naomi's, built on the foundation she had created. Naomi sat back in her chair and looked at the screen. The evidence was overwhelming. The betrayal was complete. Most women would confront their husbands. There would be shouting. There would be tears. There would be demands for explanation. But Naomi wasn't most women. She picked up her phone and made a call. Rebecca? It's Naomi Matthews. I need to meet with you. Today if possible. Rebecca Chen was Naomi's younger sister. Also a lawyer. One of the best divorce attorneys in the state. They met for lunch at a quiet restaurant far from Gregory's usual circles. Rebecca listened as Naomi laid out everything she had found. Every transaction. Every lie. Every hotel room. When Naomi finished, Rebecca sat back and whistled low. This is beyond infidelity. This is financial fraud. He used company assets for personal expenses. If the board finds out, if the investors find out, he's finished. I know, Naomi said calmly. You want to go after him legally. Full exposure. Divorce, asset seizure, possible criminal charges. No. Rebecca blinked. No? Legal battles take years. And they're private. Court documents that nobody reads. Settlements that get buried under confidentiality agreements. Naomi's voice was steady. Cold. I don't want privacy. I don't want a settlement. I want the truth to be public. Undeniable. Permanent. What exactly are you proposing? Naomi leaned forward. His 50th birthday party is in 3 months. He's planning something massive. Everyone who matters will be there. Business partners. Investors. Press. He wants it to be his coronation. The moment he solidifies his legacy. And you want to ruin it. I want the truth to stand where the lies have been standing. Naomi's eyes were hard. I want everyone who has ever celebrated him to know exactly who he is. I want it documented. Recorded. Impossible to spin or deny. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I'll need 2 weeks to prepare the divorce papers. Everything airtight. We file immediately after your reveal so he can't hide assets or create new shell corporations. Done. And Naomi? Once you do this, there's no going back. His reputation will be destroyed. The company will be in chaos. Your life will be under a microscope. Good, Naomi said simply. Let them look. Over the next 3 months, Naomi became someone she hadn't been in 20 years. She became a hunter. Every morning, Gregory kissed her goodbye and went to work. Every morning, Naomi went to her office and continued building her case. She hired a private investigator. Not to follow Gregory, she already knew where he went and who he was with. She hired the investigator to document everything. Photos. Videos. Time-stamped evidence that would hold up under any scrutiny. She brought in her nephew, Marcus, who worked in cybersecurity. He helped her access Gregory's cloud storage. His email accounts. His text messages backed up to servers Gregory thought were secure. Nothing was secure from Naomi. She found years of communication. Not just with Candace, but with other women too. Brief affairs that had burned out quickly. Flirtations that never went anywhere. Gregory hadn't just been unfaithful. He had been serially, systematically unfaithful. But Candace was different. Candace had lasted. Candace had become a parallel life. Naomi read every message between them. It was torture. It was necessary. She learned that Candace knew about her. knew about the marriage, knew that she was participating in a deception. And she didn't care. She'll never leave him, Candace had written once. She needs him too much. You're right, Gregory had responded. Naomi gave up everything to be my wife. She has no career to go back to. No identity outside of being Mrs. Matthews. She's trapped. Naomi read those words 3 times. Then she got back to work. She met with accountants who helped her trace every dollar Gregory had moved. She met with lawyers who helped her understand corporate liability. She met with tech experts who helped her plan the presentation. Because it would be a presentation. Gregory loved presentations. He loved standing in front of crowds, command their attention, controlling the narrative. Naomi was going to give him an audience he would never forget. At home, she was perfect. The dutiful wife. The supportive partner. She attended his business dinners and smiled at his colleagues. She laughed at his jokes. She asked about his day and listened to his lies. How was Boston? Exhausting. Back-to-back meetings. Barely had time to sleep. That's too bad. You should take better care of yourself. He never suspected. Not once. Why would he? Naomi had spent 20 years being exactly what he expected. Quiet. Supportive. Grateful. But while Gregory saw a compliant wife, Naomi was calculating. Planning. Preparing. She worked with Rebecca to structure the divorce filing. Everything would be submitted electronically at a precise time. The moment Naomi gave the signal, the papers would be filed. The assets would be frozen. The legal machinery would begin moving. Gregory would have no warning. No time to prepare. No opportunity to hide. She worked with Marcus to create the presentation. Every message. Every photo. Every transaction. All organized chronologically. All annotated with dates and locations. The evidence would speak for itself. She worked with the private investigator to get video footage. Gregory and Candace entering hotels together. Gregory and Candace at restaurants, holding hands. Gregory and Candace at the condo he had bought her, visible through the windows, intimate and unguarded. Everything documented. Everything undeniable. And then Naomi made one more call. To Gregory's assistant. Not Candace. His other assistant, the one who handled the actual work while Candace handled other duties. This is Naomi Matthews. I need your help with Gregory's birthday party. I want to surprise him. The assistant was eager to help. Mrs. Matthews was always so kind, so thoughtful. Of course she would help plan something special. Naomi explained that she wanted to control the presentation system. She wanted to cue up a video tribute to Gregory. Photos from throughout his life. Messages from colleagues. A celebration of everything he had accomplished. It'll be my gift to him, Naomi said warmly. A reminder of how far he's come. The assistant thought it was beautiful. She gave Naomi complete access to the venue's audio-visual system. Everything was ready. The night of the party arrived. Naomi dressed carefully. She chose a red dress, sleek and elegant, the kind of dress that commanded attention without being obvious. She wore the diamond earrings Gregory had given her on their 10th anniversary. The necklace from their 15th. Every piece of jewelry was a gift from him. Let him see what his lies had adorned. Gregory was already at the venue, greeting guests as they arrived. Naomi arrived alone, walking into the ballroom like she had done 100 times before. The room was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers. Silk drapes. Tables set with gold-rimmed china and centerpieces of white orchids. The screens Gregory had insisted on were mounted at strategic points around the room. Perfect for his planned speech. Perfect for his celebration. Perfect for Naomi's purposes. She found her assigned seat. Not at the head table with Gregory. That seat had been given to his business partner. Naomi was at a side table with the spouses of other executives. The people who didn't matter. The decorative additions to powerful men. She smiled at the other wives and made small talk. She sipped champagne and complimented the decor. And she waited. Gregory's speech was scheduled for 8 o'clock. Right after dinner. Right when everyone would be relaxed, fed, and primed to celebrate. Naomi checked her phone. Rebecca was standing by, ready to file the divorce papers. Marcus was monitoring the presentation system remotely, ready to lock Gregory out if he tried to interrupt. Everything was in position. At 7:45, Gregory stood up and made his way to the podium. The crowd quieted. Glasses were refilled. Phones were set to record. This was the moment Gregory had been planning for months. His big moment. He began to speak. Thank you all for being here tonight. When I think about how far we've come, how much we've built together, I'm overwhelmed with gratitude. Naomi pressed a button on her phone. The screens flickered. Gregory kept talking, not noticing yet. This company, this community, this life, none of it would be possible without the people who believed in me. The first message appeared on the screen behind him. Can't wait to have you inside me again. The hotel room is already booked. The crowd went silent. Gregory stopped mid-sentence. He turned and looked at the screen. His face went white. This is what 15 years of believing looks like, Naomi said quietly, though her voice carried in the stunned silence. The next message appeared. Then another. Then photos. Gregory and Candace kissing in an elevator. Gregory and Candace on a beach that Naomi recognized, the same beach where she and Gregory had supposedly gone alone for their anniversary last year. Messages kept scrolling. Hundreds of them. Intimate. Explicit. Undeniable. The crowd was frozen. Phones were still recording, but now they were recording something very different. Financial records appeared on the screens. Transactions highlighted in red. Hotel expenses charged to the company. Gifts purchased with business accounts. The condo deed with Candace's name on it and Gregory's money funding it. Gregory tried to speak. There's been a mistake, someone has hacked the system, this isn't. It's all real, Naomi said, standing up from her table. Every eye in the room turned to her. Every message. Every transaction. Every lie. All of it real. All of it documented. All of it happening while he stood beside me and pretended to be faithful. She walked toward the podium. Gregory stepped back. He looked terrified. I built your company, Naomi said, her voice steady and clear. 25 years ago, you came to me drowning in debt and bad decisions. I saved you. I restructured your finances. I created the foundation for everything you have. And then I gave up my career to be your wife. To support you. To believe in you. The screens changed again. This time they showed emails. Gregory to Candace. She'll never leave. She has nothing without me. Naomi smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. You were wrong about that. She pulled out a piece of paper from her clutch. Divorce papers were filed electronically 30 seconds ago. Your assets are frozen. Your accounts are under review. And every single person in this room now knows exactly who you are. She dropped the paper on the podium in front of him. Happy birthday, Gregory. Then she turned and walked out of the ballroom. Behind her, the room erupted. Voices shouting. Chairs scraping. The click and flash of cameras. Gregory trying to explain, to justify, to somehow salvage the moment. But there was nothing left to salvage. Naomi walked out of the hotel into the cool night air. She had left her wedding ring on the table beside her untouched champagne glass. She got into her car and drove away from the chaos. And for the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe. The next morning, Naomi woke up to her phone ringing nonstop. The story had exploded. Video clips from the party had gone viral overnight. Every news outlet was covering it. Business networks were analyzing the financial implications. Social media was on fire with reactions. Some people called her a hero. Some called her vindictive. Some called her bitter. Naomi didn't care about any of it. She met with Rebecca at her office. The divorce was proceeding exactly as planned. Gregory's lawyers had called, panicked, trying to negotiate. But there was nothing to negotiate. The evidence was irrefutable. The board is demanding Gregory's resignation, Rebecca said, scrolling through her emails. The investors are threatening to pull out. The company stock dropped 30% overnight. And Candace? Disappeared. Apparently she left the party right after your reveal and hasn't been seen since. Gregory's been trying to reach her, but her phone is off. Naomi felt nothing about that. Candace had made her choices. What about the criminal charges? Naomi asked. The company is conducting an internal audit. Once they see the full scope of the financial fraud, Gregory will likely face charges. Embezzlement. Misuse of corporate funds. It's not going to be pretty. Good. Rebecca looked at her sister carefully. How are you doing? Really? Naomi was quiet for a moment. I spent 20 years being half of someone else. Being the supporting role in someone else's story. I forgot who I was before I became Mrs. Matthews. And now? Now I remember. Over the next week, the media storm intensified. Gregory tried to give interviews, to explain himself, to somehow salvage his reputation. But every interview made it worse. He couldn't explain away the messages. He couldn't justify the expenses. He couldn't make people unsee what they had seen. Naomi's phone rang constantly. Journalists wanted her story. Talk shows wanted her as a guest. Book publishers wanted her to write a memoir. She declined all of it. This wasn't about becoming famous. This was about truth. But she did agree to one interview. With a journalist she had known years ago, before she became Mrs. Matthews. Someone she trusted. They met at Naomi's lawyer's office. Rebecca sat beside her. The interview was recorded, but Naomi had final approval on what would be published. Why did you expose him so publicly? The journalist asked. You could have filed for divorce quietly. You could have negotiated a settlement. Why make it so spectacular? Naomi thought about the question. She had been asked it 100 times in different ways. Because quietly is what he was counting on, she finally said. For 15 years, I was quiet. I was supportive. I didn't ask questions. I believed him when he said he was at a conference. I believed him when he said he was working late. My silence protected him. And you wanted to break that silence. I wanted the truth to be louder than the lies. Gregory spent 2 decades building a reputation as a family man, a faithful husband, a man of integrity. And it was all a performance. He stood on stages and talked about values he didn't have. He accepted awards for community leadership while betraying the person closest to him. And he did it all because he thought I would never fight back. Why wouldn't you? Because I had forgotten who I was. I had let myself become small. Quiet. Convenient. Naomi's voice was steady. But I'm not that woman anymore. And I never will be again. The interview was published 3 days later. It was thoughtful. Balanced. It let Naomi's voice be heard without sensationalizing the pain. And it changed the narrative. Suddenly, people weren't just talking about the scandal. They were talking about what it meant to lose yourself in a marriage. They were talking about financial abuse. They were talking about the ways successful men use their wives as props and then discard them. Women started reaching out to Naomi. Hundreds of them. Thousands. They shared their own stories of betrayal, of being diminished, of losing themselves in someone else's ambition. Naomi read every message. And she started to understand that what she had done wasn't just personal. It had touched something larger. The divorce moved forward. Grigory's lawyers tried to argue that Naomi wasn't entitled to half the company assets because she had left her career willingly. Rebecca destroyed that argument in court. My client didn't just work for Matthews Corporation, Rebecca told the judge. She saved it. She restructured the entire company, created the financial strategy that allowed it to thrive, and then stepped aside so her husband could be the public face of her work. Without her contributions, there would be no company to divide. The judge agreed. Naomi was awarded 60% of the marital assets. Not 50. 60. Because the court recognized that she had been the foundation the entire empire was built on. Grigory was ordered to pay substantial alimony. The prenup he had insisted on 20 years ago was invalidated because his fraud violated the good faith requirements of the agreement. He lost the company. He lost his reputation. He lost everything. Except his freedom. Barely. The criminal charges came down 3 months after the party. Embezzlement. Fraud. Misuse of corporate funds. Grigory took a plea deal to avoid trial. 3 years in a minimum security facility. Probation after that. He would serve less time than the length of his affair. But his empire was gone. And it wasn't coming back. Naomi attended the sentencing hearing. She sat in the back of the courtroom and watched as Grigory, diminished and defeated, stood before the judge. He looked smaller than she remembered. The judge spoke about trust. About the responsibility that comes with power. About how Grigory had betrayed not just his wife, but his employees, his investors, and the community that had believed in him. You built your success on lies, the judge said. And lies eventually collapse under their own weight. Grigory was led away. He didn't look at Naomi. Maybe he couldn't. Outside the courthouse, journalists swarmed. They shouted questions. They wanted to know how Naomi felt. If she felt vindicated. If she felt guilty. Naomi walked past them without answering. She had nothing left to prove. 6 months after the party, Naomi reopened her consulting firm. She hired a small team. Experts in fraud detection, financial analysis, corporate restructuring. The same work she had done 25 years ago. But this time, she kept her own name. Her own identity. The clients came quickly. Companies who needed someone who could see through complex financial structures and find the truth. Businesses that had been deceived and needed someone who understood how deception worked from the inside out. Naomi was good at her job. She had always been good at her job. Within a year, her firm was thriving. Within 2 years, she had offices in 3 cities. She hired women who had been out of the workforce. Women who had sacrificed their careers for marriages that hadn't lasted. Women who had been told they were too old, too rusty, too far behind to matter anymore. Naomi showed them they were wrong. One afternoon, Naomi was in her office when her assistant buzzed her. "There's someone here to see you. She says it's personal." Naomi looked up from her work. Did she give a name? Candace Williams. Naomi was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Send her in." Candace walked into the office looking nothing like the confident woman from the party photos. She was thinner. Tired. Her expensive clothes were gone, replaced with something ordinary. "Thank you for seeing me," Candace said quietly. Naomi gestured to a chair. "Sit." Candace sat. She didn't look at Naomi directly. "Why are you here?" Naomi asked. Her voice was neutral. Not kind. Not cruel. "I wanted to apologize." "Apologize?" "For what I did. For what we did. I know it doesn't matter now. I know it doesn't change anything. But I needed to say it." Naomi studied her. "You knew I existed. You knew you were participating in a lie. And you did it anyway." "I know. So what changed?" Why apologize now? Candace finally looked up. Her eyes were red. Because I understand now. Gregory made me the same promises he made you. After your divorce, he said we could finally be together. Be public. Build a life. But he didn't. He threw me away the moment I became inconvenient. The moment the scandal broke, I was the liability. I was the problem. He told his lawyers I had seduced him. That I had manipulated him. That he was the victim. Naomi wasn't surprised. That sounds like Gregory. I lost my job. My apartment. Everything I thought I had built with him was built on the same lies yours was. And now I have nothing. There was a long silence. You're right, Naomi finally said. You have nothing. Because you helped take everything from someone else. You were part of the deception. You benefited from it. And now you're experiencing the consequences. Candace's face crumpled. I know. I needed you to know I'm sorry. Naomi stood up. I appreciate you coming here. I do. But your apology doesn't absolve you. It doesn't undo the damage. And it doesn't mean I forgive you. I understand. But I'll tell you what I told the journalists. What I told the judge. What I tell myself every morning. Naomi's voice was firm. You made a choice. Now you get to live with it. Just like I'm living with mine. The difference is, I can look at myself in the mirror. Candace stood up. She looked like she wanted to say more. But there was nothing more to say. She left the office. Naomi watched her go. And then she went back to work. 3 years after the party, Naomi's firm was named one of the top consulting companies in the country. She gave speeches at business conferences. She taught classes at universities. She wrote articles about corporate fraud and financial transparency. She never wrote the memoir. She never went on the talk shows. But she did something better. She lived her life on her own terms. She bought a house overlooking the ocean. Not a mansion. Just a comfortable home with big windows and a garden she could tend herself. She traveled. She went to places she had always wanted to see but never had time for. Italy. Japan. Peru. She made new friends. Women who knew her as Naomi Chen, not Mrs. Matthews. Women who valued her for her intelligence, her humor, her strength. She dated occasionally. Carefully. She wasn't in a hurry to trust someone with her heart again. But she wasn't bitter. She wasn't broken. She was whole. On the 3-year anniversary of the party, a journalist wrote a retrospective piece. Where Are They Now? It was titled. Gregory Matthews was 2 years into his sentence. He had lost everything. His company was sold off in pieces. His assets were liquidated to pay legal fees and settlements. He would be released in another year, but he would be returning to nothing. Candace Williams had disappeared from public view. Some rumors said she had moved to another state. Started over with a new name. And Naomi Chen Matthews had reclaimed her life. Her career. Her identity. The article ended with a quote from one of Naomi's employees. She saved my life, the woman said. Not just my career. My life. She showed me that it's never too late to be who you were meant to be. Naomi read the article in her office. She smiled slightly, then closed her laptop. She had a meeting with a new client in 20 minutes. A woman who had been married to a CEO who embezzled millions. A woman who needed someone to help her understand the financial maze her husband had created. A woman who needed someone who understood betrayal from the inside. Naomi gathered her notes and headed to the conference room. This was her life now. Helping people find truth in the wreckage of lies. And she was very, very good at it. 5 years after the party, Naomi received an unexpected letter. It was from Gregory. She almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity won out. The letter was short. Just one page, handwritten. Naomi, I know I have no right to contact you. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. But my lawyer said you're the only person who might be able to help me with something. When the company was liquidated, there were some financial records that were never recovered. Documents that the IRS is now asking for. Without them, I could face additional charges. My lawyer thinks you might have copies from when you did the original restructuring 25 years ago. If you have them, would you consider sending them to my lawyer? I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for a conversation. I'm just asking for help with this one thing. I know it's a lot to ask after everything I did. But you were always the person who could solve impossible problems. Gregory. Naomi read the letter twice. Then she picked up her phone and called Rebecca. Gregory sent me a letter. He's asking for financial documents from 25 years ago. Do you have them? I have everything. I never throw away documentation. Are you going to help him? Naomi was quiet for a moment. What happens if I don't? He could face additional charges. Possibly more prison time. And if I do? He resolves the issue with the IRS and finishes his sentence without complications. Naomi thought about it. About the man who had betrayed her. About the years of lies. About the pain he had caused. She thought about the woman she used to be. Quiet. Compliant. Willing to sacrifice herself. She thought about the woman she was now. Strong. Independent. Successful. Send him the documents, Naomi finally said. Rebecca was surprised. Really? Not because I forgive him. Not because I care what happens to him. But because I'm not going to let his choices define mine. He made me carry his lies for 15 years. I'm not going to carry his consequences too. You're a better person than I am. No, Naomi said quietly. I'm just a free person. And I want to stay that way. She had the documents sent to Gregory's lawyer that afternoon. She didn't include a note. She didn't add any message. The documents spoke for themselves. They always had. 3 days later, she received a response. Not from Gregory. From his lawyer. Miss Chen, on behalf of my client, I want to thank you for providing the necessary documentation. The matter with the IRS has been resolved. Mr. Matthews asked me to convey his gratitude and to tell you that he understands he has no right to ask anything else of you. He wishes you well. Naomi filed the email away and never thought about it again. Because Gregory Matthews was no longer part of her story. He was just a chapter that had ended. 7 years after the party, Naomi was invited to speak at a women's leadership conference. The auditorium was packed. Over 2,000 women filled the seats. Young professionals. Corporate executives. Entrepreneurs. Students. Naomi stood backstage, waiting for her introduction. She wasn't nervous. She had given dozens of speeches by now. But this one felt different. The moderator finished the introduction. Please welcome Naomi Chen, founder and CEO of Chen Consulting Group and one of the most respected voices in corporate ethics and fraud detection. The applause was thunderous. Naomi walked onto the stage. She looked out at the sea of faces. Women of every age, every background, every story. And she began to speak. 7 years ago, I stood in a ballroom and watched my entire life explode in front of 300 people. I exposed my husband's 15-year affair. I destroyed his reputation. I ended my marriage in the most public way possible. The room was completely silent. People asked me all the time if I regret it. If I wish I had handled it differently. If I think I went too far. She paused. The answer is no. I don't regret it. Not for a second. A ripple went through the audience. But not for the reasons you might think. I don't feel good about destroying someone's life. I don't take pleasure in revenge. That's not why I did it. I did it because I needed to remember who I was. For 20 years, I had disappeared into someone else's story. I had become the supporting character in someone else's narrative. I had made myself smaller so someone else could be bigger. And I told myself it was love. I told myself it was partnership. I told myself it was what marriage looked like. But it wasn't love. It was erasure. Naomi's voice was steady, strong. And the moment I found those messages, the moment I saw the proof of his betrayal, I didn't just see his lies. I saw mine. I saw every time I had silenced my own voice. Every time I had swallowed my own ambition. Every time I had made myself convenient instead of authentic. So when I exposed him, I wasn't just exposing his affair. I was refusing to disappear anymore. The audience was leaning forward. Hundreds of women nodding. Some were crying. I'm not telling you to blow up your life. I'm not telling you to seek revenge. I'm not telling you that my way is the right way. But I am telling you this: you are not the supporting character in someone else's story. You are the author of your own. And if you have made yourself smaller to fit into someone else's vision of who you should be, you can choose to take up space again. It's never too late. It's never too dramatic. It's never too much. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to demand truth. You are allowed to walk away from anything that requires you to betray yourself. Naomi's eyes swept across the audience. 7 years ago, I was a woman who had lost herself. Today, I am a woman who found herself again. Not despite the betrayal, but because I refused to let it define me. My husband thought my silence meant weakness. He thought my patience meant compliance. He thought I would never fight back because I had too much to lose. He was wrong. I had everything to gain. My identity. My voice. My life. And I took it back. The applause started slowly. Then it built. Then it became a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. Women approached Naomi afterward. They shared their stories. They thanked her. They told her she had given them courage. One young woman, barely 25, waited until everyone else had left. "Miss Chen? I just wanted to say thank you. I've been in a relationship where I keep making myself smaller. Where I keep apologizing for wanting things. Where I keep being told I'm too much or not enough. And I've been scared to leave because I don't know who I am without him." Naomi looked at this young woman and saw herself 25 years ago. "Can I tell you something?" Naomi said gently. The woman nodded. "You already know who you are. You've just forgotten." But she's still there. The woman who wanted more. The woman who refused to shrink. She's waiting for you to remember her. The young woman's eyes filled with tears. "What if I can't find her again?" "You will. Because she's not lost. She's just been quiet. And the moment you give her permission to speak, she will." The woman hugged Naomi. "Thank you. Thank you so much." After she left, Naomi stood alone in the empty auditorium. She thought about the woman she had been. The woman who had found those messages and felt her world collapse. She thought about the woman she had become. The woman who had rebuilt herself from the rubble. And she realized something profound. The betrayal hadn't broken her. It had freed her. Because she had been living in a cage built from her own compliance. And the moment the cage door opened, even if it opened through pain, she had chosen to walk through it. She had chosen herself. And that choice had changed everything. 10 years after the party, Naomi received an unexpected email. It was from a woman named Sarah. She worked at a university doing research on women who had experienced public betrayal and how they rebuilt their lives afterward. "Miss Chen, I know you don't typically do interviews, but I'm working on a longitudinal study about resilience and identity reformation. Your story has been referenced by hundreds of women as a turning point in their own decision-making. I would love to include your perspective, if you're willing." Naomi thought about it for a week. Then she agreed to meet. They sat in Naomi's office. Sarah was young, earnest, genuinely interested in understanding rather than sensationalizing. "What I'm trying to understand," Sarah said, "is what happens after the revenge. After the public moment. After the satisfaction of exposure. Because that's where most stories end. But real life continues." "You're right," Naomi said. "Real life does continue. And that's the part no one talks about. So what happened for you? After the party. After the divorce. After you had one." "I had to learn how to be alone," Naomi said simply. "For 20 years, I had defined myself in relation to someone else. I was Gregory's wife. I was the woman who supported his career. I was half of a partnership. And when that partnership ended, I had to figure out who I was as a complete person." "Was that difficult?" "Terrifying," Naomi admitted. "Because I had spent so long being what someone else needed that I had forgotten what I needed. What I wanted. What brought me joy." "How did you figure it out?" "I started small. I made decisions without consulting anyone. What to eat for dinner. What color to paint my living room. What time to wake up in the morning. Tiny choices that were just mine. And then I made bigger choices. Where to live. What kind of work to do. Who to spend time with. Each choice was a reclamation of my own agency." Sarah was taking notes rapidly. "The women I've interviewed talk about your story as a form of permission. Permission to prioritize themselves. Permission to demand truth. Permission to walk away. Did you intend for your story to have that impact?" "No," Naomi said honestly. "I was just trying to survive. I was trying to make sense of a betrayal that had reshaped my entire understanding of my own life. But if my survival gave other women permission to survive too, then I'm grateful for that. Do you have any regrets?" Naomi was quiet for a long moment. "I regret the time I lost. I regret the years I spent being smaller than I was. I regret not asking more questions earlier. I regret not trusting my own instincts when things felt wrong. But I don't regret exposing the truth. I don't regret the way I ended things. Because that moment, that public moment, was the first time in 20 years that I was completely, unapologetically myself. Even though it was painful. Especially because it was painful. Pain is honest. Pain doesn't lie. And I had been living in a world of comfortable lies for so long that pain felt like clarity." Sarah closed her notebook. "One last question. If you could go back and talk to the woman you were the morning you found those messages, what would you tell her?" Naomi smiled. "I would tell her that she's stronger than she knows. That the life she's about to lose wasn't real anyway. That the person she's about to become is worth every moment of pain she's about to endure. And I would tell her that 10 years from now, she'll be sitting in her own office, running her own company, living her own life. And she'll be happy. Genuinely, authentically happy. Not because she destroyed her husband, but because she found herself." The interview was published 6 months later as part of a larger academic study. Naomi read it once, then filed it away. She was no longer interested in looking backward. She was too busy living forward. 15 years after the party, Naomi turned 65. She threw herself a party. Not a big one. Just close friends. People who knew her as Naomi, not as the woman from the scandal. They gathered in her home, the one overlooking the ocean. They ate good food and drank good wine and told stories that made them laugh. At one point, someone mentioned the anniversary. Has it really been 15 years since that night? Naomi thought about it. Yes. 15 years since I stopped lying to myself. Do you ever think about him? About Gregory? Sometimes, Naomi admitted. Not with anger anymore. Not with pain. Just with a kind of distant curiosity. Like thinking about a character in a book I read once. That's incredibly healthy. Naomi shrugged. I spent too many years letting him live in my head. I'm not giving him any more space. What about Candace? Do you ever wonder what happened to her? No, Naomi said simply. Her story isn't mine to wonder about. Later that night, after her friends had left, Naomi stood on her balcony looking at the ocean. She thought about the life she had lived, the mistakes she had made, the lessons she had learned. She thought about the woman who had stood in that kitchen 15 years ago, reading messages that shattered her world. She wished she could tell that woman that it would be okay. More than okay. But that woman had to walk the path herself. Had to feel the pain. Had to make the choice. Had to reclaim her life. Just like Naomi had done. The moon was full over the water. The waves were steady and strong. And Naomi felt at peace. Not because her story had a happy ending, but because it had an honest one. She had lived. She had hurt. She had survived. She had thrived. She had become herself again. And that was everything. 20 years after the party, Naomi was featured in a business magazine as one of the most influential consultants in the country. The article mentioned her past briefly. Chen's personal experience with corporate fraud and betrayal informs her work with clients. One paragraph in a 5-page profile. That's all it had become. One paragraph. The rest of the article was about her company, her methodology, her impact, her innovations in fraud detection and corporate transparency. Naomi Chen. Not Naomi Matthews. Not the woman from the scandal. Just Naomi Chen. Expert. Leader. Entrepreneur. The woman she had always been, finally visible again. She framed the article and hung it in her office. Not because she was proud of the recognition, though she was, but because it represented something more important. It represented a life fully reclaimed, a voice fully restored, an identity fully owned. She had spent 20 years being erased, and she had spent 20 years coming back. The math felt right. On the 20th anniversary of the party, a journalist reached out asking if Naomi would do an interview reflecting on that night. Naomi declined politely. That story is over, she wrote back. I've told it enough times. Now I'm living a different story. One that belongs entirely to me. The journalist respected her decision. And Naomi went back to work. Because she had clients to help. Businesses to save. Women to mentor. A life to live. The past was behind her. Not forgotten. But finished. And the future was hers. Completely, utterly, beautifully hers. If you've made it this far in this story, thank you for staying with me. Thank you for witnessing Naomi's journey from betrayal to freedom. Her story isn't unique. Thousands of women, maybe millions, have experienced some version of what she experienced. The betrayal. The erasure. The moment of choosing between silence and truth. If you're one of those women, if you've ever made yourself smaller to fit into someone else's life, if you've ever silenced your own voice to keep the peace, I want you to know something. You are not alone. You are not broken. And you are not defined by someone else's choices. You are the author of your own story. And it's never too late to start writing. If this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something, if it reminded you of your own strength, please hit that subscribe button. Join this community of people who believe in truth and resilience and the power of reclaiming your own narrative. Leave a comment below and tell me your thoughts. Have you ever had to choose between comfort and truth? What would you have done in Naomi's situation? I read every comment and I want to hear your story. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, someone who's struggling to find their voice or their identity, share this video with them. Sometimes we all need a reminder that we're stronger than we think. Hit that like button if Naomi's courage inspired you. Because courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and choosing truth anyway. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being part of this community. Remember, You are not the supporting character in someone else's story. You are the author of your own. Write it boldly. Live it honestly. And never, ever make yourself smaller than you are. Until next time, this is your reminder that truth always survives. And so will you.